There's a quiet truth about children who grow up ignored. They often become adults who struggle to believe they deserve attention at all. They walk into a room and feel like they must shrink. They enter relationships and wonder if they're too much. They succeed in something, but instead of celebrating, they wait for it to be overlooked, as if invisibility is their natural state. This is not because they lack talent or worth, but because the foundation of their sense of self was built in silence. Psychologists call this an internalized neglect schema. It means that over time the brain wires itself to expect neglect, to anticipate dismissal, to assume that needs are a burden. A child who is ignored enough times eventually learns not to ask. They convince themselves that wanting love, affection, or understanding is somehow wrong. Music. Have you ever seen a child standing in a crowded room, quietly tugging at their parent's sleeve, waiting for even the smallest glance, the smallest acknowledgement? Maybe you've noticed it on a playground, in a classroom, or even in your own family. The child who doesn't cry the loudest, who doesn't demand attention, but instead retreats into silence. On the surface, it might seem like nothing dramatic is happening, but inside that child's mind, something profound is unfolding. Because for a child, being ignored isn't just an inconvenience. It feels like a deep fracture in the very foundation of their sense of self. And here's the painful truth. Childhood neglect, whether intentional or unintentional, doesn't always look like abuse. It doesn't always look like cruelty. Sometimes it's simply absence. Sometimes it's the unanswered questions, the lack of eye contact, the forgotten birthday, or the parent too busy, too tired, too distracted to notice. But the psychology of the ignored child runs deep. It shapes how they see themselves, how they view the world, and even how they build relationships decades later. We often assume children are resilient, that they bounce back from almost anything. And yes, children do adapt. But adaptation is not the same as healing. When a child learns to live without acknowledgement, they adapt by shrinking themselves, by hiding their needs, by convincing themselves they don't matter as much as others. And this adaptation, though it allows them to survive childhood, can quietly haunt their adulthood in ways they may not even recognize. From a psychological perspective, acknowledgement isn't just about feeling good. It's about survival. Research in developmental psychology consistently shows that children need 3 core things to thrive: safety, stimulation, and connection. If one of these is missing, their development is affected. But connection, being seen, heard, and valued, is the one that shapes the child's sense of identity most directly. John Bowlby, the founder of attachment theory, argued that secure attachment, formed when a caregiver consistently acknowledges and responds to a child's needs, creates a foundation of trust. That trust then becomes the blueprint for future relationships. But if a child is ignored, if their needs are met with silence or inconsistency, they don't just feel disappointed in the moment. They internalize a dangerous belief. Maybe I don't deserve love. Maybe I'm not important. This isn't exaggeration. Studies in neuroscience show that when a child's attempts at connection are repeatedly ignored, their brain interprets it as a threat. The stress response is activated. Cortisol floods the body. Over time, this can rewire their nervous system to expect rejection. Their baseline becomes anxiety. Their emotional regulation becomes fragile. And yet, from the outside, they might just look like a quiet kid. When a child is outright mistreated, the harm is obvious. But when a child is ignored, the damage is more invisible, more subtle, but just as real. A child might stop asking questions because they expect no answer. They might stop showing excitement because no one responds. Over time, they begin to disappear, not physically, but emotionally. Psychologists sometimes call this emotional neglect. Unlike physical neglect, which leaves scars you can see, emotional neglect leaves scars hidden beneath the surface. The independent child grows into an adult who struggles to trust others. The high achiever becomes the perfectionist, never satisfied. The peacekeeper becomes the people pleaser, unable to say no. And perhaps the most heartbreaking adaptation is the child who stops trying altogether. The one who concludes, if no one cares anyway, why bother? This child often carries apathy into adulthood, struggling with motivation, ambition, and hope. Ignored children rarely talk about their experience because how do you explain what it feels like to be invisible? There's no dramatic story to tell, no event to point to, no scars to show, just silence. Just the memory of moments that should have mattered but didn't. And that silence itself can become a barrier. Adults who grew up ignored often hesitate to seek help, fearing they'll be dismissed again. Therapy clients sometimes minimize their experiences, saying, "Nothing really bad happened to me." But the absence of something essential is itself a trauma. It's like growing up in a house without air. This doesn't mean every ignored child is doomed. Many grow into compassionate, thoughtful adults precisely because they know what it feels like to be unseen. But it does mean their journey is often harder. It means they have to spend years unlearning beliefs that were planted in them before they even knew how to question them. So where does healing begin? Not with perfection. Not with instantly becoming confident, but with recognition. With the simple but powerful act of saying to yourself, "What happened to me mattered. My needs were real. My pain is valid." For the ignored child who grew into an adult, the first step is often giving themselves the acknowledgement they didn't receive. And though that may sound abstract, it can be surprisingly practical. It can be as small as pausing to celebrate your own wins. As small as saying your feelings out loud, even if only to yourself, as small as daring to believe that what you think and feel matters. Because the truth is, acknowledgement isn't something you outgrow. The need to be seen doesn't vanish with age. It just goes underground. And the journey of healing is about bringing it back into the light. Think about how this shows up in friendships. An ignored child often becomes the quiet friend who listens deeply but struggles to share their own struggles. They were never truly invisible. They were simply waiting to be seen.